Reconstruction era in America witnessed several changes in the late 19th century. However, the change that left a permanent imprint on the American life was the loss of the frontier. F.J. Turner, in the latter half of the 19th century, declared that the frontier had ceased to exist. Professor Chittobroto Palit points out that the loss of the frontier instilled in the minds of the Americans the fear of losing their economic robustness, one of the characteristic marks of their identity.
After 1890, the last frontier was gone. United States was spanned from the east coast of the Atlantic to the west coast of the Pacific. There was no more new land available for further expansion of agriculture. Naturally, United States turned inwards for industrial growth. Now they had to multiply their goods through industries to keep up the standard of living. This was one realization. The other realization was that there was enough rural surplus already generated since the Civil War. And this rural surplus of capital could be pumped into industrial growth. These two are the key factors for the incoming industrial revolution.
The Industrial Revolution at its simplest refers to the transformation of a mainly agrarian economy based on manual labor into one dominated by industry and machine-based manufacturing. The Industrial Revolution also refers to a period of massive economic, technological, social and cultural change. The precise dates are a subject for debate, but historians generally agree on the period between the 1760s and the 1830s as the watershed. This was the period when Britain experienced rapid industrial development, which gradually spread to the rest of the world, including the United States. Economists believe that the industrialization in any country requires the presence of certain factors of production. These include land, labor, capital, and business organization. The American economy in the late 19th century possessed all these factors in abundance. However, the most important factor that ushered in the Industrial Revolution in America was land. In fact, America had a surplus of land which she used not only to boost the Industrial Revolution but also to sustain it. Explicating the vitality of this primary resource, Professor Palit has pointed out.
United States was particularly a very good cradle for an industrial revolution, much better than the situation which generated industrial revolution in UK. This was a land of plenty. If we talk of land as the first factor, we see that United States had plenty of land. More land, less people.
Large tracts of land became the laboratory for new inventions both in agriculture and industry. Labor was available aplenty during the latter half of the 19th century. People from many parts of the world flocked to this new land in search of work, food, and security. In fact, the American government began to follow a well-conceived immigration policy to boost her industrial revolution.
United States deliberately had allowed migration of labor from the old world to the new. We know that not only the early settlers, the the pioneer farmers who had founded the United States, in successive batches, people from the old world, the continent, had come to United States. Waves of people had come, particularly the underdogs of the European society. They had all come, especially from the East European countries, from Russia, from Italy, from France. All these countries had provided cheap labor. They had come over to the United States. So labor was available in plenty, and on top of that, the slaves of South, they had been released by the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln in 1863. So they became also free labor, added to the force of the North. Next we come to the rise of capitalism. Now we find that because the land resources were plenty, there was quick money available. These countries, the states of the United States, they had a lot of reserves of the basic things of industry like coal, iron, then oil. These, and finally it will be electricity. Now, coal reserves were plenty in the United States. So much so that the entire plains of Illinois and further coal available to other areas like Oklahoma, Texas, these places also had coal. And if we look to north, further north, just below the Great Lakes, there was enough land where new states would be born later on in the 1870s, like Dakotas and Wyoming and Idaho. The states, they also had enough coal under the soil. So coal reserves were there. So easy money was coming by sale of coal. If we talk about iron, once again, the main area for iron would be, once again, down the lakes, Great Lakes of the North, to Illinois. The whole belt had enough of iron as well, iron deposits. The famous Mesabi mine, iron and steel mine, that was part of this area of Illinois, particularly between, this was very close to Chicago, on the banks of the Lake Michigan. Plenty of iron ore was available. If we talk about oil, as you know, oil was first drilled, spudded in Pennsylvania in 1845 by a man Drexel. He had found oil there, high-grade oil there, petroleum. And then gradually these operations extended to Texas, California, Oklahoma. So plenty of oil was also available. Electricity, of course, is a matter of invention. We talk about that later on. But electricity could be generated. So apart from these four basic things, there were harvests of silver, copper, and gold in the territories called Arizona, then the territory known as New Mexico, then California is famous for gold rush, that was there. Then further the territories where Nevada, Montana, these areas also had these copper reserves, the famous Anaconda mines giving copper. They had plenty of the other minerals. The mineral bauxite, which gave aluminium. Bauxite was available. Because of all these things, there are many people who overnight became very rich. They had discovered and dug out the mines. And once they had dug out the mines, they sold the raw material cheaply to the future industrial tycoons. And they made plenty of cheap money. And that was the source of capital. Now they would require inventions, because these deposits had to be converted into industrial goods, manufactured goods. For that, the inventive genius of America was called for. So we'll have to pass on to the inventions after this.
The major inventions before the Civil War included the cotton gin by Elijah Whitney, steamboat by Robert Fulton. After the Civil War, the focus was on transport, especially the great railroads. The first person to use high-pressure steam to power a vehicle was Richard Trevithick in 1801. But the first engineers to usher in the railway era were a father and son duo, George Stephenson and Robert Stephenson. We have the Santa Fe Railroad, Western Union Railroad, connecting north with south. With the introduction of railroads, connectivity within the United States increased dramatically. Robert Fogel has thus described as the Railway Revolution. Then Samuel Finley Breese Morse invented the telegraph during the Mexican War around 1845-1846. That gave connectivity not only within the United States but also across the Atlantic with the Old World, the European continent. Then we have Charles Bush, who was the first to invent the dynamo, which could generate electricity on a small scale. Scholes and Glidden invented the typewriter, which amused the literator Mark Twain. An ingenious man called Thomas Alva Edison not only generated electricity through the dynamo, but also took a patent on such generation. He amassed a huge amount of money by electrifying most of New York City. We must also not forget Alexander Graham Bell. He invented the telephone, which gave another kind of connectivity. It has been estimated that the Federal Patent Office issued 67,600 patents between 1860 and 1900. With these patents, industries thrived, the standard of living rose, and people's lives became very comfortable. The fruits of industrialization at this stage were reaped by a few very enterprising capitalists. One such titan was steel king Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie's life was a true rags-to-riches story. Born in a poor Scottish family that immigrated to the United States, Carnegie became a powerful businessman and a leading force in the American steel industry. He introduced the Bessemer steel-making process to America and in 1875 opened his largest steel plant, the Edgar Thomson Works in Braddock, Pennsylvania. Today he is remembered as an industrialist, millionaire, and philanthropist. A shrewd and equally competent contemporary of Carnegie was John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller was of German descent. Born in 1839 at Richford, New York, he was educated in the public schools of Cleveland, Ohio. He became a bookkeeper in Cleveland at the age of 16. In 1862, he went into business with Samuel Andrews, the inventor of an inexpensive process for the refinement of crude petroleum. After rapid expansion, the firm was superseded in 1870 by the Standard Oil Company, organized by Rockefeller, his brother William, and several associates. In early 1872, Rockefeller helped form the South Improvement Company, an association of the largest oil refineries in Cleveland. He managed to obtain substantial rebates on railway shipments, but that arrangement was cancelled in 3 months after popular protest. But most of Rockefeller's competitors in Cleveland had already been forced to sell out to his combine, and by 1878 Rockefeller had under his control 90% of the products of oil refineries in the United States. Gradually, he built a virtual monopoly over the marketing facilities. In 1916, Rockefeller's personal fortune was estimated to be about $1 billion. Then there was Henry Ford, another great entrepreneur. Henry Ford was the founder of the Ford Motor Company and father of modern assembly lines used in mass production. His introduction of the Model T automobile revolutionized transportation in America. Ford was a prolific innovator and was awarded 161 US patents. As owner of the Ford Motor Company, he became one of the richest and best-known people in the world. Mention must be made of Copper King Daniel Guggenheim, 1856 to 1930. He used to extract copper ore from the Anaconda mines. Copper was essential for industry, particularly for the flourishing of electrical industries. His firm, Guggenheim Brothers, became the leading enterprise in the copper industry of the United States. Guggenheim extended the activities of his firm to include gold mines in Alaska, rubber plantations in Africa, tin mines in Bolivia, and nitrate deposits in Chile. Guggenheim negotiated the merger of Guggenheim Brothers with the American Smelting and Refining Company and became the president and chairman of the board of directors of the American Smelting and Refining Company from 1901 to 1919. Then there were railroad magnates like Hill, Harriman, Gould, and Morgan. They were the titans of the age who pooled the resources provided by the Industrial Revolution and laid the foundation of big business in America. It is apt to call it big business because of the amount of capital they had, as recounted by Professor Palith.
For Morgan, for example, the father, Jupiter. Now, he started agglomerating various industries, rail industries, other industries, and he also was a banker. So, money trust, he established a money trust. So, banking, speculating, all this, what we call share trade, all these things he cornered. He actually ultimately Morgan became the owner of 124 companies, alone. This is called formation of monopolies and trusts. In that process, he rooted out all the small companies, indigenous small home companies. They were rooted out. So he became the owner of a trust of 124, Morgan Trust, money trust, 124 companies, and the total capitalization was $7 billion. $7 billion. Like Standard Oil's Rockefeller. He also weeded out all small companies around him. Ultimately established the huge Standard Oil Corporation. Huge. Its capitalization is also over 10 billions. Something like Carnegie's United States Steel Corporation. It also goes into several billions. Reach 13, 14 billions. So there were so many such trusts and monopolies created, which ultimately gave you the big business in the United States.
Sir, the Industrial Revolution, what were its aftermaths?
I would first of all say that the United States became one of the richest nations in the world. It really maximized its natural resources. Standard of living went up and up in the United States. These are all good sides. And the bad side is that only a few people monopolize most of the benefits of industrial revolution. So there was once again the birth of two classes in American society, as Cooper, famous philanthropist cum industrialist, Cooper used to say, they produced, on the one hand, the plutocrats, men of wealth, on the other side, paupers. So plutocrats and paupers were created. That is, United States became a very polarized society, a two-tier polarized society. Some people were stinking rich, haves, and some people were really poor people in the United States. Not so poor as in India or any other countries, but they were poor. They were poor. And of the historians who had written much after the event had passed, most famous is Michael Harrington. Michael Harrington had written two books. One was American Poverty. Another book was The Other Side of America, where he described the poverty of the American people. So here is an industrial revolution which generates plenty, at the same time generates poverty. Both bipolar situation had been created due to industrial revolution. And if some industries go on making profit and profit by depriving the common workers, ultimately there will be political activity. And ultimately there will be recession. You are now hearing of meltdown and this recent recession. It's all due to the selfishness of the capitalists. If you exploit labor, exploit natural resources utmost, and go on multiplying goods, a time would come there will be a recession. There would be a recession. United States also faced that kind of recession, that kind of meltdown at one point. So that was the result of the excesses of industrial revolution. So that is the consequence, the aftermath of the industrial revolution. So that is also there. And anyway, when we close down on this topic here, we see that this is the period when they are basking in wealth, producing industrial goods and selling them all over the world. That was the situation in the 19th century. That was the situation in the 19th century. So they had produced so much. But a time would come when they would have to recoil, and that would lead to the growth of what we can say labor movements and the trade unions of the 20th century. But today we close here on this particular theme of the rise of the industrial revolution, growth of capitalism, and rise of big business. Thank you.
In this episode on the economic change, growth of capitalism and big business, our discussion began with the question why there was a switch from agricultural revolution to industrial revolution. Then we discussed the factors like land, labor, capital, organization, which supported the Industrial Revolution of America. We also discussed the great inventions and inventive genius of America. We then discussed the rise of the titans, the emergence of industrial tycoons or big businessmen such as Carnegie, Rockefeller, Henry Ford, and Guggenheim. These were the people who really revolutionized industrial America. But they also monopolized production, distribution, and marketing to build what can be called big business empires. We concluded by discussing the aftermath of the Industrial Revolution, the growth of capitalism, and the rise of big business. The curse of big business was the formation of trusts and monopolies like Carnegie Trust, Guggenheim Trust, Morgan Trust, Money Trust. As a result, small business was dehumanized. There were entrepreneurs establishing big industries that raised the standard of living in the United States. The United States became the world's wealthiest country, the richest country. But there was another side to this development. All this was at the cost of the poor people. So there was labor unrest, the trade union movement, and other forms of protest. This will be the subject matter of our next lecture.